Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Robert Pritchard, Superintendent of the South Orangetown Central School District. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Robert Pritchard, Superintendent of the South Orangetown Central School District. Good morning, everyone. Okay, folks, we're going to correct a minor technical difficulty here, and we'll be back with you momentarily. And it looks like we're live. Great. Thank you very much, folks. Sorry for that minor glitch, and welcome to our second session of the introduction to our community, to our parents and families regarding our reopening plan. Again, my name is Dr. Robert Pritchard, Superintendent of the South Orangetown Central School District. For those of you who are joining us for the second session, who were in attendance last night on our live stream, thank you for rejoining us. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, I just want to say welcome. And the format for this morning's session will be, I'll be running through a presentation answering some of the questions that we've received over the weekend from our families concerning the reopening and some of their concerns or suggestions or areas that need additional clarification. And so we've aggregated those comments and questions, and we've done our level best to answer those, and I'll review those with you this morning. And then we've also opened up the chat feature in our Zoom program that you are probably watching us now on, and also in YouTube Live. So please feel free to make whatever comments relating to reopening, or questions, or areas that you might need clarification in regarding the reopening plan, and we'll do our best to answer some of those questions at the end of my presentation this morning. So again, thank you for being here. We are grateful for your partnership. I had a chance to look at some of the questions that we didn't get to answer last night, and we'll try to include those responses today or this evening. We actually have a third session of this reopening presentation that we're going to be giving this evening at 7 p.m. as well. So hopefully you can join us for that as well. And we're certainly very, very happy that the response that we've seen from our community and from our families in terms of your participation. I think at one point we've had over 600 participants, and that just really is an indicator of your commitment to our children and their education. So thank you very much for that. So I'm going to cover some things that I may have covered yesterday as well, and this is really for the benefit of our newcomers to this, those who weren't with us last night, as well as to serve as an additional emphasis for those who were here or who were here and maybe need additional clarification. Our reopening plan is based on a hybrid learning model with 50% student capacity with social distancing. Groups will physically attend school for full weeks on alternating weeks. Group A is students with last names beginning with A through K. Group A will attend the first week of school in person, September 8th through September 11th. Group B is students with last names beginning with L through Z. Group B will attend the second week of school in person, September 14th through the 18th. And then they'll alternate in the following weeks. Our rationale for choosing this model was covered in yesterday's session. Today we're going to move forward in answering questions about how the model will work. So the first series of questions that we've received over the weekend are centered on clarifying questions about hybrid versus virtual. Our first question is there a difference in expectations of students who participate in the hybrid model versus those students who participate on a 100% remote basis. And as you remember from yesterday, families will be able to choose between the hybrid and also the virtual, the 100% virtual remote basis. At this point, most folks, based on the survey that we put out, are opting for the hybrid model. But will there be a difference in the expectations between those two models? Expectations will be the same for students whether they participate in the hybrid model or 100% remotely. Students' daily schedules will be similar whether they are participating in person or virtually. Students participating remotely are expected to engage fully with their teachers and classes. Question number 2. Are 100% virtual students placed in separate classes from students participating in the hybrid model? And the answer is simply no, that all students will engage in the same mode of instruction, while some will be receiving that instruction physically on campus and others may be experiencing that model remotely or engaging in that remotely. So there is no distinction between the two groups in terms of the content that is being delivered. Question 3. If a significant number of families opt for 100% remote learning, will families who want in-person class participation be invited in for extra days? No. At this point, a high proportion of our families district-wide are opting to have their children participate in the hybrid 50% in-person model. In addition, we want to remain flexible and allow families who opt for the 100% remote learning to have the opportunity to opt in to the hybrid learning at any point during the school year. The next category of questions that we received are centered on staffing. Question number 4. What has South Orangetown Central School District done to ensure that it has the staffing capacity to support the academic, social, emotional, and safety requirements of the hybrid and/or 100% remote model? So we as a district have worked diligently to maintain ongoing and consistent contact with all district units in regards to assessing and supporting potential accommodations while working to maximize our staffing capacity. To supplement this, the district has also appointed substitute instructors spanning multiple New York State certification areas. In regards to special education programming for our students, we received a number of questions in that category as well, so I'm going to cover those now. Question number 5. Will students with IEPs, individualized educational programs, have the opportunity to attend school in person more frequently than 50%? Students with IEPs in grades K through 12 will attend school on a 50% basis and receive services according to their plans. Space permitting, on their off weeks, IEP students in grades kindergarten through 12 will be provided with an extended learning space to receive synchronous instruction and in-person program accommodations and related services in accordance with their IEPs. Now, you may hear me use the word synchronous or asynchronous throughout the presentation. We didn't really talk about that yesterday, but as many of you know, synchronous basically is the term that we use for real-time instruction that's streaming, where the instructor actually gets onto a video camera, kind of like we're doing right now, which is synchronous. It's basically instruction or delivery of instruction in real time with basically synchronizing the teacher and the student in real time using these technologies. Asynchronous would be centered on the instructor creating a recording or providing materials that can be accessed at a later time. So if, for example, the teacher were to make some supplemental materials available to students to include those types of recordings, then that would be considered to be asynchronous. Getting back to the question concerning those opportunities for students who have IEPs, the district has worked hard with principals to identify space. Parents will receive a separate communication confirming their students' participation and their program for the fall. So that information will be forwarded to you as it becomes available for families who have students with IEPs. Question number 6. For students with IEPs, what does extended learning space mean? Who is supervising? Are they grade specific? What is the expectation of families? Well, extended learning spaces are additional spaces that allow us to socially distance our students and co-teachers/consultant teachers as needed in order to meet the needs of the IEP. This is an additional classroom space to allow students to actively participate in their daily lessons. It also allows students to receive program accommodations and individual support during their remote week to the greatest extent possible. Special education teachers will work collaboratively with their regular education partner to plan on how best to use these spaces in order to meet the needs of all students. Each building has different spaces and a plan to support our classified students on a daily basis. All students will be expected to participate on a daily basis. We recognize that our classified students need additional support as defined on their IEP in order to access the curriculum. This plan allows our staff to provide daily support and IEP programs, accommodations, and related services on a daily basis. And some of those accommodations, as some of you may know, some of you have worked or have students with special needs. There's a wide variety of accommodations and related services. And again, these are very individualized. So if you have questions or concerns, if you are a parent of a student who has an IEP, it's best because these plans are so individualized, it's certainly always best to refer those questions either back to your building principal, or in the event that you're looking for a change to those accommodations or services, that those have to be addressed through the Committee on Special Education, or you may hear me refer to it as CSE. Question number 7. If students with IEPs are able to attend more frequently than the 50% basis, does that mean that they may be exposed to more students because they are with their typical attendance cohort 1 week, and then in different cohorts in the extended learning spaces during the remote week, and with 2 different groups for busing? The short answer is yes. The idea that we have students who may come in contact with, we want to minimize contact between students, but by design, students who are in more frequently may be more at risk. So we're going to take extra precautions to make sure that those students follow the same rigorous screening protocols daily in order to minimize those risks. Attendance will continue to be taken for contact tracing purposes. Question number 8. Will students with IEPs who opt to participate 100% remotely be able to receive services virtually? Parents have a right to opt their children in for 100% remote participation. However, a CSE may need to be convened, and more than likely any changes to a student's IEP will require the Committee on Special Education to convene on their behalf in order to address those prospective changes. Question number 9. How will 504 plans operate for students participating in the hybrid model? So those families whose students, who are aware that their students have a 504 plan, which is basically accommodations that can be made to a student's instructional program for a variety of reasons. And those students with 504 plans may attend school on a 50% basis and receive services both in person and virtually. Students may also choose to participate 100% remotely and receive services virtually. Question number 10, how will speech services work? I think you heard me mention related services earlier in the presentation. Speech is an example of a related service, and speech as well as other related services will be offered in person as per the IEP. If a parent chooses for their child to remain 100% on distance learning, we will work with that individual family to determine how best to meet their IEP needs and may need to convene the CSE. Question number 11. Where will in-person related services take place? Will my child be entering in and out of multiple office spaces throughout his or her day? Each building has identified spaces that allow social distancing when students receive their related services. Due to the nature of this individualized service, groups will be developed and students will be kept with the same group of students throughout the year. This will require students to move to these locations. Question number 12. Can students who participate on a 100% remote basis participate in in-person enrichment or athletics? Will students who participate on a hybrid basis be able to participate in in-person enrichment or athletics during their remote weeks? So in summary, I'm reading this question as if the student is not engaged in an in-person programming, whether it be because they are involved 100% remotely or because it's on their off week. So really the simple answer to this is that there will be no in-person enrichment or clubs for the fall. Our school administrators are exploring ways to support virtual enrichment opportunities. The start date for fall sports was pushed back to September 21st by the New York State Public High School Athletic Association last month. However, the governor has not yet made a decision regarding whether school sports may resume in the fall. Once a determination has been made, we'll make decisions based on what the New York State Education Department, the Department of Health, and the New York State Public High School Athletic Association guidance is at that time, and we'll communicate that to our families once we have additional guidance to that end. The next question, can families who want to participate in the hybrid model request a schedule change for their child? Due to space and logistical limitations, the only schedule requests that will be considered are those which would allow siblings residing in the same household who have different last names to attend school the same weeks. In these cases, parents should contact their child's principal to make that request. Student records may be reviewed and additional documentation may be requested to appropriately review each request. Also, if legally changing names of siblings, please submit the appropriate paperwork with the district registrar. Just checking out the chat room there. I see we're getting some good chat, so that's excellent. Keep the questions coming, folks. They're very helpful. A similar question is centered, that we received was centered on what, as far as changing the option for your child in terms of which model. Is as follows. Can a family change its decision regarding whether their child will participate in the hybrid or fully remote model? Families may opt to change how their students participate. If parents who initially chose 100% remote participation, it may take a maximum of 30 calendar days to transition them to in-person attendance. Again, because we would need to make arrangements, it would require us to change how we're currently configured. It may not take the full 30 days to make those accommodations, but again, as soon as you know what your preference is, please make that information available to your building principal and contact your building principal if you have any questions relating to how to change your child from a hybrid to a fully remote model. The next series of questions are centered on schedules. Great question. What are the school hours? Secondary school hours are 8:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. and elementary school hours are 9:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. for students. If you have any additional questions or if you need further illumination on schedules or what the class may look like in terms of how the classroom is scheduled, we do have a wealth of information on our webpage on the reopening site. I actually have a tab open to that now. But on our reopening plan on our district website, you'll see a lot of this information, and I really appreciate this format where we're having the Zoom and able to answer the chat and have this sort of what appears to be a two-way conversation, which I think is phenomenal, and it's great what we can do with technology these days. But if you're anything like me, you do need a reference. So when you do have some free time, go to our website, South Orangetown Central School District, SOCSD.org, and take a look at our 2020 reopening plan, and you'll see a table of contents, and all of this information is listed there. The next question, are students who are learning remotely expected to be online for the full school hours? If so, how is the school district planning to address stamina and/or engagement and adjust homework expectations? All students learning remotely are required to participate on camera during live sessions, the synchronous piece. They're required to do this to optimize their interaction with their teachers and classmates. Elementary students will log in with their classroom teachers and can expect breaks during the day. Secondary students will follow their course schedules for the 9 period day. Based upon the class and the work to be accomplished during each session, we'll determine whether the students need to remain online for the entire class session. Schools will be sending out information to families within the week regarding when they can expect teacher assignments and course schedules. So, in a nutshell, the answer is this. I think it would be inappropriate, really, to keep a student online on a screen for 6 hours, 6.5 hours every day. That would be an unreasonable expectation. So the short answer is no. We don't expect students to be online all the time. That would just be, I think it just would be not healthy. But as you'll see, and I'll give you just a sort of a quick sketch as to what, and we'll cover a little bit this more in a little bit greater detail later on in the presentation. But just in general terms, the learning model for distance learning will look something like this. The class will start with a synchronous live stream where teachers and students, whether they're in the classroom or whether they're remote, 7 to 10 minutes with sort of an introductory mini lesson from the teacher. At that point in time, once that mini lesson has been delivered synchronously, students will break away to either do group work, or will be doing some independent work, either asynchronously or again with their groups, for an amount of time, actually for the bulk of the lesson, because we really want the work to be learner driven. And then at the conclusion of the lesson, the students will rejoin the class synchronously so the teacher can provide some closure to the lesson. That's essentially how the online learning will be configured. So that the students and the teachers won't be engaged in a synchronous dialogue the entire time, just really at the beginning and at the end, although we want to afford the teachers some flexibility in terms of how they design the lesson for the day, but for the most part, that's how the lessons will be set up for the teachers, by the teachers, and to engage students in the work. The next question, who is responsible for attendance? Teachers are taking attendance for students participating both in person and virtually. This is a New York State requirement. Okay, we're going to shift topics now, and we're going to get a little bit into curriculum. The next question, how is curriculum being modified for hybrid learning? Teachers are leveraging applications such as Google Classroom, Schoology, Zoom, Flipgrid, Screencastify, and Seesaw. Seesaw is an application for students in grades K through 2. And they're going to use these applications to enhance student learning at school and remotely. Students will engage in hands-on activities, whether they are in school or at home. Specials and electives will run during school hours only. Physical education will run for students attending school in person. Video activities will be provided for remote learners. Specific social distancing guidelines will be applied for each specific area. Differentiation will be based on individual student and class data, and lessons will be developed to meet the needs of all students in the class. Response to intervention, RTI, you probably heard it referred to as that. RTI will continue to be developed both in person and virtually. Remote learning is not homeschooling. Students who participate in 100% remote learning will be expected to fully participate and engage in their SOCSD classes and coursework. How have teachers prepared for the hybrid learning model? In addition to professional development offered throughout the spring, distance learning throughout the spring. Let me just take a step back here. Most, if not all, of our teachers, distance learning is not new to them. We've actually spent many months now developing this model for distance learning. Teachers have had the opportunity to participate in curriculum development and several new opportunities this summer to prepare for the fall. In fact, we're in the middle of a 2-week virtual learning community professional development program on developing hybrid learning environments right now. A separate extended workshop program on designing hybrid learning environments began last month, and this will continue into September. But again, at this point, all of our teachers are veterans on this, because when we closed last March, they were essentially put in a position where they had to become experts on this essentially overnight. And we've learned a lot in the last few months. We've learned a lot from the teachers. We've learned a lot from the students. We've learned a lot from our families. So we're going to incorporate that experience as well as those best practices from other school districts and apply those now. How will materials or equipment be distributed to students on their remote weeks or those participating 100% remotely for the first week of school and on an ongoing basis? We have experience with this as well. This past summer, we had, as many of you know, and some of you may have participated in, the summer STEAM camp. And we were able to physically distribute sort of these kits, materials, manipulables, learning materials, instructional materials for students who were participating remotely. So we'll continue to do that. We've learned from that experience this past summer. We've actually had an opportunity, as I said, to practice that, and we plan to continue that this fall. Kindergarten through grades 5 will receive school materials to engage in hands-on learning from home. Schools will send details to families. We're in the process of determining what school materials our secondary students will need at home. There will be a little bit more variety there, obviously, because there's a lot more electives, and but we'll make sure that we provide those deliverables to each of our families as students do this work at home. Our next question is, how are teachers going to manage in-person and virtual instruction simultaneously? And that really is a great question, because to my knowledge, there aren't very many school districts that are attempting to do this. So we feel that we are cutting edge as it relates to offering in-person and virtual instruction simultaneously. Teachers will initiate whole class instruction using Zoom from their desktops once they transition to their lesson or mini lesson. And you heard me describe that mini lesson earlier as sort of that introductory session, 7 to 10 minutes, that teachers will conduct synchronously with their students, both in person and both in person and virtually or remotely. The remote students will be able to listen to the audio of the classroom and or transition to independent and or group work. Collaboration between in-classroom and remote students will be via instructional tools such as Google Classroom. And by the way, folks, if you're not familiar with these applications, I can assure you that your children are. If you do have questions about what these are, I'm certainly happy. Your teachers will, I'm sure, will work very closely with you, but most of your students have already worked with these instructional tools, such as Google Classroom, Schoology, Zoom, Flipgrid, etc. And presumably, you're all comfortable using Zoom right now because we're using that to have this conversation right now. This will be challenging, but again, teachers have been preparing for this hybrid model of instruction for many months now. So we're excited that we are on the cutting edge, and knock on wood, hopefully the technology will hold out on us, and we'll be in good shape for that. But in the event that it's not, we can always move between synchronous and asynchronous models of instruction. So we are prepared for anything that really is thrown at us as it relates to managing in-person and virtual instruction. Next question: How will students who are learning remotely be included and engaged during live lessons? And this was one of those concerns that I had heard over the course of the last few months as we were sort of thrown into this, as the pandemic set on us, that we had to sort of reinvent what schooling was, and we had to do it really very, very quickly. And one of the things that folks, at least initially, were most concerned about was this idea that students who were learning remotely, there were varying levels of engagement based upon, whether or not, a teacher was deploying a particular methodology in his or her classroom. We've standardized much of that now, and I want to say that the teachers really ramped up and really leveraged those lessons learned in a very professional manner. I'm very proud of our teachers for over the last few months accelerating their own professional growth relating to how to operate sort of in this remote learning environment. But more specifically, teachers will be able to view students at home and will check in and engage with them either in whole or small group instruction models, as well as in-person students during each lesson. The in-person and virtual learning students may collaborate in Google Classroom, Zoom breakout rooms, or one-to-one conferences with their teachers. And our Assistant Superintendent for Instruction, Dr. Kulat, did make the comment anecdotally. One of the lessons that we have learned from our students was that the Zoom breakout rooms are actually something that our students prefer. And it's a technology that that students seem to be readily adapted to that, and they seem to prefer working in that particular environment. So regardless of COVID-19, that's something that we will carry forward with us as a best practice. Regardless, teachers may choose to group in-person students with at-home students in Zoom breakout rooms. So what we're proposing here is this: that students who are at home will have the opportunity to form work groups with their in-person classmates via the Zoom breakout rooms. So there really won't be any distinction as far as that model is concerned, and it really does sort of force the issue in terms of creating those collaborative work groups in cyberspace. So we feel that this is really a breakthrough for this particular model, and to me, I think to many of us, we feel that particular aspect of this opportunity to form these collaborative groups between in-person and remote learning students really will create that sense of engagement that really is essential for this model to work. Students may also engage with hands-on material during the activity portion of the lesson. And that activity portion will typically follow what, as I described, as that mini lesson at the introductory phase of the lesson. Engaging with these hands-on material during the activity portion will again lower the amount of direct screen time students will have during a typical school day. The goal of the workshop model is to have a tight mini lesson and to maximize the amount of time students are working on problems collaboratively during the activity. Let me speak a little bit to collaboration here right now. And I think I have to do a quick sidebar here, and just really give a ton of credit to my colleagues and coworkers, my administrative team here. I don't know if you know this or not, but I'm participating with you folks right now via a synchronous model. But just so you know, many of my colleagues are also contributing to this conversation right now. So I see some ghosting going on in my notes, and I just want to give a shout out to my colleagues who are helping me right now, in particular Dr. Kulat, who I'm sure is listening in right now. I see his cursor moving remotely. If two old guys like Dr. Kulat and I can figure this out, and he's typing haha right now. If two old fellows like me, believe me, your kids, your students who are digitally native, will be able to readily adapt to this, and they've shown us that they can. And it really is, I think it's a very exciting time to be in education, because we are, we are learning probably as much from your students as they are learning from us, if not more so in many instances. Our next question. How are assessments being modified to ensure equity in grading for those participating in the hybrid model and those participating remotely? Let me see if I can put that in plain English. So, grading practices, assessment rather, I should say, more specifically, assessment. And this really centers on this idea that, how do we test kids in a way that prohibits outside assistance if they're in a remote scenario that maybe possibly they might not be doing their own work, that they may be getting some outside assistance, and I guess if I could put this sort of in the vulgar terminology, or the cheating specifically. So trust is an important piece of this, but please realize that as students go on to higher education, we're seeing many of our students who have left or graduated from Tappan Zee High School. Many of our recent graduates are really involved in this model of instruction. Many of our students who go on, remote learning is something that is not going to go away, and we need, we're obliged as educators to not allow students to be tempted by that, and to be able to assess them in ways that really are cheating proof, so to speak. But even then, we really rely upon sort of this idea that we are all part of a community, and ethics and character really do count. And we say that a lot, but we're training our students to be good adults as well, and certainly we want to ensure that folks, and I know our families feel similarly, and that is this, that we raise our children to be people of integrity. So let's work together on this as not only as a team, really, as a team of professionals, as well as our partners at home. In a hybrid learning environment, teachers may develop 2 copies of an assessment. I mean, that's something that we've historically done. There's not that temptation to sort of share answers. But in-person students would take one version. Remote students would take the second version the following week. So let's say, for example, the assessment is given on a Friday in person to Group A. On the following Monday, the test is given to Group B in person for those who are in that hybrid model, but a different version of the test. So in that sense, we could certainly put that sort of that measure in place to kind of reduce the temptation to share answers. But I think more importantly, we want to rely more heavily or create more emphasis on something called performance-based assessments, sort of like real-world assessment. In real life, people will assess you or judge you based on the effort that you make, based on the quality of work that they see you performing. And this is something that we've developed over time in these performance-based assessments would include quizzes and transfer tasks. It may occur on camera and in person throughout a unit of study. There are a number of formative and summative assessments that assess students' ability to apply what they've learned and transfer of their knowledge to a specific problem. So that really does capture more of a real-life approach to how we evaluate a student's ability to understand the content and apply that content. Student writing is often used as a part of assessment process to determine a student's ability also to apply their learning. Nothing is foolproof, but we feel that if we deploy a variety of assessments, we'll capture a much better understanding of the student's progress, as well as eliminating any sort of, as I said, I hate to bring it to that level, that least common denominator of cheating. But I know that whoever asked this question, or a number of people who would ask this question, I'm certain that was sort of embedded in that was implied in that question. So I hope that answers. Question number 24. Will there be consistent lesson plans across grade levels as there were in the spring? The short answer is yes. The work of our instructional coaches and school-level teams will ensure consistency and best practices. Next question. How will assemblies or class trips be handled to accommodate in-person and remote students? Well, all assemblies and or field trips will be virtual. We had a great example of that last spring. We had, two examples sort of stick out in my mind. The West Point field trip that we did virtually, and we had a Philadelphia trip that we also did virtually. And these are two examples of successful virtual field trips that were created last spring. And I have a feeling we're going to see some even more creative and innovative approaches. Who knows where we'll go next? And I personally love participating in those virtual field trips and have done so. Next question. And this was a question that was asked yesterday, and I'm glad we're providing additional emphasis on this because it is something that I hold very near and dear to me as an educator. Will there be outdoor recess? Daily physical activity is absolutely critical, whether you're in school or out of school. The short answer is yes. Students will be wearing masks during recess and be encouraged to use hand sanitizer at the start and end of recess. What opportunities will students have to interact with each other in person and remotely? Students may be working collaboratively in person with social distancing and virtually. Recess will also provide students attending school in person with the opportunity to play. We are working hard to make use of outdoor spaces for socially distanced interaction, and our principals are working to maintain positive school culture and support social emotional learning. Members of the school PPS is an abbreviation for Pupil Personnel Supports. So members of the school PPS team are shifting activities so that all students can participate in activities together focused on social emotional learning. An example of this is the activities related to Just Say Hello Week. And these activities are under revision to allow interaction with all students. Our next question is, how will office hours be held? Office hours will take place outside of the regularly scheduled school day in a virtual format. And your teachers, your children's teachers will provide you with a schedule of their office hours, and that will certainly we will hope that you'll take full advantage of that. What additional services is the school district providing to support students' educational needs during their remote weeks? Again, remote weeks being the time that they're not in school. And over the years, we've actually invested heavily in these services. So, because we know that we consider the home school partnership to be critical in your child's development, and the idea that our counselors are able to provide that outreach we have the ability to provide that outreach to that home environment because we've made those investments in those resources, and we've applied those over the years, but now this becomes even more critical. Families should reach out to their child's teacher and school counselor with concerns regarding their child's academic and/or social emotional needs. We are working on integrating tools that assess students both in person and remotely using tools similar to the mood meter to help identify students who may need counseling support throughout the day. And again, I have to give a shout out to Dr. Karen Tessick, who has worked tirelessly in terms of reimagining that entire PPS department and working very collaboratively with the rest of the team here to ensure that those services are integrated seamlessly, both in school and at home. All right, the next series of questions are centered on technology. Quite a few questions, and again, we've had an opportunity to sort of do a trial run on many of these systems. So we've learned a lot over the last few months, but we are taking it to the next level now. So we don't expect things to go perfectly because as matters relate to technology, they almost never do. But we're going to make sure that we have redundancy built into these systems and into our plans to ensure that we minimize any sort of downtime as they relate to technology, and also relating to your child's ability to access those technologies. What technology will my child need to participate in hybrid or 100% remote learning this fall? The district has standardized on Dell for our Chromebook purchases due to the product's reliability and sturdiness. I don't know how many of you are online right now. Last night, I think we had upwards of 600 people. And when I got home last night, after having had this sort of two-way dialogue with over 600 people, I realized that I was doing it largely using a Chrome operating system, which I'm using right now. So, I mean, I think if anything, that should really speak to much of the usability of that system, and it's something that I feel is sustainable, it's reliable, and it's cost effective. Remote learning instruction is provided using a number of web-based tools that require a current browser. And again, I just mentioned the Google Chrome browser, Microsoft Edge, Firefox, etc. We're trying our very best to be what Mr. Brady, who's I'm going to give him a shout out. He's our technology expert and our director of technology. But we try to select those systems that we refer to as device agnostic. I've seen students over the years access our system using Chromebooks, but also the BYOD, the bring your own device, whether it be a handheld device. I don't think that's personally optimal but many of our students have chosen to use those tools. But really at this point, we don't think we need parents to go out and purchase, very expensive systems. We're going to make every effort to provide those systems to students. Again, though, we understand that you may have preferences at home, and you may want to invest, or you may have already invested in those tools, those devices. But realize that anything that can simply run a browser is really going to fit the bill in terms of being able to, in terms of your child being able to access the classroom. Most remote learning last spring was easily managed using a simple browser-based device such as a Chromebook or laptop. Devices older than 3 to 4 years, though, are not recommended because the advances that have been made to technologies in such a short amount of time, as many of you are kind of painfully aware, because many of you have had to replace your own home systems because of that. Please note that certain devices may be more conducive to remote learning. For example, having a formal keyboard will help with typing assignments. In addition, some classroom-related activities may require the use of a webcam and a microphone. The next question: are students participating in the hybrid model required to bring their personal or school-issued devices to school every day? Yes. All students must bring their devices, whether personal or school-issued. They must bring them every day that they attend in person. Please note, due to the pandemic, the district will limit the sharing of devices and resources. The next question: will the district be implementing a one-to-one mobile device initiative? The answer is yes. The district has a one-to-one mobile device initiative at Tappan Zee High School, which has been in place for the past 5 years. The district will implement a similar one-to-one mobile device initiative for grades kindergarten through 12 in the fall. However, due to the global pandemic, technology vendors are experiencing issues with the supply of technology products and equipment as the race to meet demand from schools and businesses increases worldwide. As a result of these supply chain issues, delivery of the new devices we ordered in the spring has been delayed until mid-November. The district's formal one-to-one initiative will begin in the late fall. Additional information regarding the district's one-to-one initiative will be available in September. Those students and families that indicated a need for a mobile device via the parent reopening survey that many of you have already completed, it's going to be a need-based requirement in order that we can provide those devices at the start of school for those of you who have indicated that you don't have access to those to that equipment. The next question: who should my child contact if they need technology assistance during their remote week? If a student or family experiences issues with accessing remote learning, they should first bring it to the attention of the classroom teacher. The classroom teacher will help clarify the type of issue and may resolve the issue directly. If the classroom teacher cannot resolve the issue, they will forward it to the school's instructional technology teacher. Now, I can hear some of you at home thinking, well, that's a bit of a catch-22, because if my only means of accessing the teacher is Zoom or my online system, and that's not working, or I don't have access and that's not functional, how in the world am I supposed to contact my teacher? Well, we still use the telephone around here. So in the event that you are having difficulty getting online, certainly feel free to contact the office of the school where your child attends. But if there is any sort of let's say any sort of opportunity to use your device to have a conversation with the teacher, and if it's convenient, certainly feel free to contact the teacher first, and then we'll certainly we'll refer that question to through the appropriate channels. For non-instructional hardware-related support issues, the district has created an online help desk system that students and parents can access to submit a support issue, and that, accessing that help desk is detailed pretty great detail on our website. But again, if all else fails, you can pick up the phone and make a call, or arrange, and if you're flat out with no technology at all, zero, the last case resort would be to actually physically come to the school and have a conversation. But again, realize that we're going to be using social distancing and do that in as safe a manner as possible. And that's largely, most of you understand that and would probably use that methodology anyway. So, I don't mean to, overly explain that. Will students learning remotely see their peers in the classroom during live sessions? So, privacy and security are big issues and big concerns living in the digital age. So that's a great question. Cameras will be focused primarily on the teacher. However, during activities such as virtual breakout rooms and group work, students will see each other as they work together. We ask that students respect the privacy of their peers. To further protect the privacy of our students and staff, live sessions will not be recorded. Okay. I'm going to give you a quick pop quiz here, folks, at home, just to make sure we've been on an hour now, all right? And I think you're all doing a great job here. I'm looking at the chat room. It's going great. So here's my first pop quiz to everybody. Who remembers what PPS stands for? Anyone? Okay, it's Pupil Personnel Services, right? So I'm going to use the term PPS because it's a bit of a tongue twister to say Pupil Personnel Services. It's almost as tricky for me as saying sanitization, which is also, as you heard last night, I stumbled with horribly. But Pupil Personnel Services, or PPS. How will students access mental health services in person and remotely? School counselors, social workers, school psychologists, and prevention counselors will remain available to students both in person and remotely. Each school has developed a trauma-informed reentry plan that details the school's outline to reach out to families and students to ensure there are open lines of communication with all families and help is readily available. In addition, the help cards that your children have that you should be familiar with, the help cards will be distributed to all students and published on the school homepage within the opening weeks. This resource has all the contact information for all the supports at each building, as well as community resources readily available to our parents in the event that they should require assistance immediately. Next question. How is social emotional learning being addressed? And again, if you heard me last night, you'll know that really that is going to be the top priority as we return to school. Again, it's our top priority beyond even the academic, our academic mission, because if a student isn't in a space, a mindset to do the work based on all of this, all that children today are experiencing in their environments, then it's going to impact on their ability to learn, and nobody knows that better than you as parents. In the trauma-informed reentry plan, each building has identified the pathway to integrate social-emotional learning for their building. As a district, we are committed to using the opening days to build a sense of community, reviewing safety protocols, and most importantly, focusing on building relationships with our students. What is the plan for lessening anxiety of students and staff if, on an in-person day, a student who was there the day before is out sick? What will be done to protect the student's privacy and prevent rumors and stigma? And boy, this really, what I want to underscore here now is that we really do need to be on this, all of us, our community needs to really have a sort of a shared philosophy on what it means to provide timely, transparent, and accurate information. And oftentimes, social media makes that difficult. So, and particularly as it relates to privacy, sort of these gossip channels or sort of social media being used to sort of counteract some of the work that we're doing here in attempting to again maintain privacy, protect the students and staff privacy, as well as make sure that the truth is preserved as well, because you can't make decisions based on false information. So, student and staff privacy is imperative. Our team continues to discuss ways to normalize the new screening procedures, safety protocols, and our new instructional model. We do not share any individual's information with other families, and we share any information only internally, only when we absolutely have to, only when it's absolutely necessary with key administrators and staff. And again, I'm going to put this in bold letters. We ask for families to join us in respecting each other's privacy and to alert the building administrator if there is any concern regarding rumors. And some of these rumors start off very benign. They're not meant to be hurtful, but they oftentimes grow into that. I remember when we first went to remote learning last March, and we had just closed our facilities. I would get calls from parents, out of concern and an abundance of caution, calling me to ask me when I was going to share information relating to the identity of students who may or may not have contracted COVID-19. And first of all, that's really not the school district's responsibility, and it could actually be damaging and be counterproductive, because the Department of Health really has the resources to do the contact training, contact tracing, and also the ability to really reduce and mitigate those public health concerns, and we wouldn't want to inadvertently interfere with that process by sharing information that one wasn't true and also would constitute a breach of a student's or staff's privacy. So understand that we get it. We get the concerns, and we understand the fear and the apprehension related to working in a more social environment now as we start to reintroduce ourselves back into society. But it's very important that we let the Department of Health do their job, and not provide information that could otherwise be counterproductive. Please remember that the only official sources of information regarding our school district are our building and district administrators, word of mouth from them. Also on our website, www.socsd.org, and our highly regulated Facebook and Twitter feeds that are also identified as official sources of information. Wow, okay, you guys are doing great, and the time does fly. It is now 11:11, and I do want to leave some time for some of those questions that have come up in the chat room, and we've got a few. And just as a sort of an administrative note here, we're going to get to answer as many questions as we can possible right now. And those, right now I have our communications person, Ms. Citrollo, she's actually aggregating your questions and trying to sort them in a way that if a person asks the same question, if many people are asking the same question, that we sort of batch them so we can get to as many questions as possible. But those that we don't get to, again, it's not that we're just going to forget about them. We'll roll them into tonight's session if we aren't able to get to them today. And there will be questions, again, as I mentioned last night, that we won't have answers to, or we might not know the answers to, that we have to go back and research. So we'll keep a running list of questions, answers to those questions in our frequently asked questions link on our website. So, and if your question needs to be answered and it hasn't been answered through any of the means that I've just described, pick up the phone and I'll be happy to have a conversation with you or direct you to somebody who does know the answer to that as well. And I'm certainly not opposed to, and as maybe some of you may know, to, in a very socially safe, well-distanced manner, sitting down and having coffee with any of you who have the time, who have any inclination to sit down with the superintendent and have coffee and ask those questions. Because to me, I miss in person, I really do, and hopefully we'll get back to a point where we can do that in a safe way. Okay, so the first question that came up in chat, will students be required to wear masks at all times? The answer is yes. This was one of the first questions answered in last night's session. And this is one of the updates included in our final reopening plan. And again, this constitutes a bit of a shift from our original draft of the plan, where we said that the children may have the option of taking it off. However, I'm not sure we can manage that in a safe way. Students and teachers will wear masks indoors, including in restrooms at all times. However, students may remove face coverings for meals and scheduled short breaks at the direction of staff, as long as they maintain appropriate social distance. Anyone who is medically unable to tolerate a face mask or appropriate facial covering will be required to submit a doctor's note and wear a face shield. Schools will have face masks and face shields available if students arrive in school without them. And I know that there's different opinions about this, and I haven't been watching the chat online, but for every one person who is outraged that students and teachers have to wear masks, there's another 10 people who would be outraged if they didn't wear those masks. And we're going to err on the side of caution. I am not a scientist. I am not a physician, and I am not a public health expert. But my sense is that if people feel unsafe, we're not going to be very productive at all. And we want to make sure that the community here, our community of learners, feels safe. And if you find that your child is struggling with the mask wear, we have a few weeks before the start of school. Maybe now is the time to start familiarizing them with the wearing of that protective, personal protective equipment. And if it does absolutely challenge your student to the point where they cannot mentally or physically wear the mask, it is strongly recommended that you have a conversation with your child's physician, and that you look for a way to look for an alternate means, like a transparent face shield. But again, as I suggested earlier, that would be really need to be supported by documentation from a physician or your healthcare provider. The next question: how will incoming freshmen be helped in Let me start again. I really did not have as much coffee as I typically do today, so, but I think I'm doing okay. How will incoming freshmen be helped in orienting them to Tappan Zee High School? That's an awesome question. Tappan Zee High School is preparing a virtual orientation video for incoming freshmen that will be shared the week of August 31st. Mr. Arrieta, our Tappan Zee High School principal, also plans to host Zoom webinars with high school students before school begins to answer questions. Will teachers be able to instruct and have student-responsive learning given all the new distractions in the classroom? Yes. It is important that we keep students engaged in their learning, and we're going to be especially sensitive to that, because while this is the new normal, in a sense, because we're in this for an extended time. We've already been involved in this, and again, we're sort of evolving. But looking at this in a positive sense, while some of these things may be distractions, and many of those things will be distractions, and we're going to have to account for that, other things will actually be things that will change us forever, that will improve student learning in the classroom, and serve to accelerate and promote student engagement. So again, I think there will be hopefully some residual good that comes out of this new environment, and certainly from a technology perspective, but from a social emotional standpoint, I think that many of us, adults and students alike, have become more resilient. We've become more adaptive. We've become more aware of what it means to be part of a community. And I think those are all good things. And, we want to keep the good things, and we want to, as George Couros, someone who I actively listen to oftentimes, says, let's make the good stuff so loud that you can't hear the bad stuff, right? So that's what we intend to do. But we need to be patient, and certainly I appreciate the patience that you've shown us, and the patience that you've shown us as we move forward in this new environment. Next question: how is the district caring for students' anxieties, non-compliance, and looking out for pandemic fatigue? And pandemic fatigue is not a phrase that I have used, but I'm gonna build that now into my lexicon, because I think that's a great description of what many of us are experiencing at this point. Again, school counselors, social workers, school psychologists, and prevention counselors will be available to students both in person and remotely. Our schools have developed trauma-informed reentry plans that detail how they will reach out to families and students to ensure there are open lines of communication and help readily available. In addition, the health cards will be distributed to all students and published on the school homepage within the opening weeks. This resource has all the contact information for the supports at each building, as well as community resources readily available to our parents in the event they should require assistance immediately. As a district, we are committed to using the opening days to build a sense of community, reviewing safety protocols, and most importantly, focusing on building and reestablishing relationships with our students. Next question. Are students attending for the full day? Yes. Secondary schools hours are, and secondary schools are the middle school, South Orangetown Middle School and Tappan Zee High School. The hours for those secondary schools are 8:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. and elementary school hours, Tappan Zee Elementary School, listen to me. That was a slip. William O. Schaefer and Cottage Lane Elementary Schools hours are 9:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. for students. Students learning remotely are required to participate on camera during live sessions to optimize their interaction with their teacher and classmates. Elementary students will log in with their classroom teachers and can expect breaks during the day. Secondary students will follow their course schedules for the 9-period day. Is synchronous learning akin to lecture? How will that work in the elementary schools? It's not like a lecture, and we certainly want to avoid sort of this one-way presentation, teaching at students. That's something that we don't feel is great instructional practice, although I know that there are some teachers who do very well at that. However, the synchronous learning model is not a lecture. However, the mini lesson or teaching points can be delivered in a lecture style format. And again, some of the best, as a former student myself, or maybe a lifelong learner is probably a better way to put that. There are some people there are teachers who are amazing lecturers, and you can listen to them forever. But for the purposes of this instructional model, we are relying heavily upon our students' ability to be learner active, I guess is the phrase we like to call it here. So students really do drive the lessons here, and the students' ability to produce content as well as to consume content is really the cornerstone of our instructional practice here. At the elementary level, students may step away from the screen during the activity portion of the lesson. So an activity portion of there's a variety that could look very different depending upon the teacher, depending upon the lesson, depending upon the learning outcome. But again, that activity portion really is an opportunity for students to process content, to apply content, and generate and produce content. So you can't do that when you're being lectured at. During that activity portion also, we'll provide students with books, math manipulatives, science materials, art materials, etc. Next question. Do all special education parents who want their child to attend 100% virtually need to request a CSE meeting to determine remote accommodations? No. The default setting on special education students or students who are classified with an IEP, that really the default setting is that we want to get those students in as often and as frequently as they can, just because we feel that not just our special education students, but in particular our special education, there are laws that really govern their attendance and the services that they receive, and we want to be compliant with those laws. But also we understand that they require that they may be more fragile in the sense that they have different needs. So we will work to develop a plan to work with each family and schedule a CSE, a Community and Special Education meeting, only if necessary or requested by the parents. Next question. If sports are allowed, will the South Orangetown Middle School pool be opened for swim teams? Yeah, so this is a sort of a clarification on something I said last night. Last night I said, pool is closed, everybody out of the pool, blew my whistle, no pool, closed for the year. That's not exactly accurate, all right? So I'm going to correct myself. The answer to that question is yes. If interscholastic athletics are allowed to commence after September 21st, our South Orangetown Middle School pool will be open to our interscholastic athletic swim teams. However, the pool will not be used by physical education classes nor open for outside usage. I figure it's a little bit easier to manage the social distancing between, as it relates to the interscholastic, the boys and girls swim teams. Next, when will kindergarten students be tested since it was canceled in the spring? Kindergarten students will be screened during the first few weeks of school at William O. Schaefer. Will schools continue to operate a 6-day cycle? Bit of a trick question, because I got confused with this at first as well, and I had to kind of shift my mindset. But the answer is this: yes, schools will continue to operate on a 6-day cycle, because think of it this way. If there is no difference in terms of content delivery, synchronous learning, asynchronous learning, every student, regardless of whether they're in school physically or remotely at home, if those lessons are the same, then we're still on a 6-day cycle. So that's something you're going to continue to be mindful of. But there's no distinction really between in school and out of school. They'll be assessed the same. It's the same content. It's the same lesson. They access it pretty similarly. Truthfully, being in school really is an opportunity for students to reacquaint themselves with the sort of the physical environment and learn how to negotiate in society outside of their homes in a safe manner, and also to become more comfortable around their peers and with and those adults that are important in their lives. And that's really the benefit of being in school right now. And so we're hopeful that, we're hopeful that many students will be able to be successful at that in-school piece, but realize that there is no distinction. Other than that, there's no distinction between being in school, lessons delivered in school or out of school. It's the same lesson delivered by the same teacher at the same time to two separate groups of kids that will be alternating, but we're still on the 6-day cycle. I hope I didn't make that more confusing in my explanation, but that's certainly how I came to terms with that. How will an IEP student with full-day one-to-one aid to assist them in access the curriculum receive this service remotely? Okay, so let's say that there is a student who has that receives support from a one-to-one aid. How does that work in a remote scenario? One-to-one aid plans will be developed for remote learning in conjunction with the parent. So again, if you have questions about that, you are a parent and that applies to your child, please contact the special aid, the PPS department. Will there be a print calendar? I think I speak for a lot of us that a print calendar is very refrigerator worthy. And our communications folks have done an amazing job over the years of providing us with something that I think really is a helpful tool for those of us who appreciate that sort of paper and sort of that analog calendar. But as we've communicated in the Friday SOCSD Summer Update eBlast, as our reopening plans have progressed, our schools have begun to populate their Google calendars, their digital calendars for the 2020-21 school year. Dates are subject to change based on evolving conditions and local and state guidelines. For this reason, a print calendar will not be published for the 2020-2021 school year. Families are strongly encouraged to refer to the district and building Google calendars starting this Friday, August 14th, for the most accurate, up-to-date event information. Instructions on how to subscribe to Google Calendar notifications and updates are described in Google Calendar Quick Reference, linked on the calendar's webpage at SOCSD.org. So again, there won't be a print calendar this year. And again, I think that's due largely, again, because of the distribution issues associated with that, but also because we're really living in a sort of a dynamic scenario right now. One of the things that I can just as an example, we've in our calendar, we've allotted for superintendent conference days, which is time during the year that we've traditionally used to provide staff development for our staff, for all of our staff. And I'm going to hold back on scheduling those days, and here's why, and I think this is going to be particularly important for many of you. One of the questions that hasn't come up in any of these sessions, to my knowledge, has been, kids in Group A versus kids in Group B, and equity. Like, as we get into the holidays and different calendar events where we don't have school in session, how will we assure that there's an equal number of instructional time dedicated to both Groups A and Group B? And we're going to use those superintendent conference days ultimately to balance out those days between those two groups. So we as we start to see, as we start to develop the calendar, we'll keep you posted on when we're going to schedule those superintendent conference days. Obviously, there's a lot that goes into planning those days, so we want to give everybody a lot of heads up on that. But know that we're going to hold off on scheduling those until we have a better idea as to the number of days that between each group and between Group A and Group B, and we'll use that as an ability to make sure that there's appropriate balance between the two groups in terms of instructional seat time between, for our students. Okay, so it is now 11:33. I've gone 3 minutes over, and I know that there probably is a very long list of additional questions that have grown in our chat room, which is great. And we're going to set about to answering many of those questions, if not all of those questions, and we're going to roll those into tonight's presentation. As we took last night's, we developed this morning's agenda based on some of the questions that we had received last night. Obviously, there will be some questions that remain to be answered, and also some questions that require additional emphasis. So we'll work on those, and we'll make sure that we turn those around. We provide those to you as a written document that will be conspicuously presented to everyone on our webpage. But we'll also deal with those real time tonight at our meeting. Our next session will kick off at 7 p.m. tonight. This session will cover questions pertaining to curriculum, instruction, special education, and technology. So it's kind of like this morning, but part 2. And we're gonna finalize any additional any other questions you might have at that time. And we'll be posting the text for this Q&A portion of our webinars on our website reopening page this week, so stay tuned for that. And finally, some of you who I won't see tonight, thank you for tuning in today. I hope you will be able to join us again tonight. Thank you for submitting your questions. As always, I am grateful for our partnership. I am grateful to be your superintendent, and I wish you all the best and look forward to working with you and seeing you again soon. Stay safe, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.